Hi everyone, welcome, welcome. We'll give it another few minutes just to let folks come in, but in the meantime, feel free to enjoy Raj's music, which I think, Raj, is this your own, this
Yeah,
you? Yep,
this is
this is
me.
Raj himself. So um, enjoy the high energy music and we'll get started in a minute or two. Raj, also
This is
feel
how we
free
get to
to,
put it on YouTube afterwards and not have it taken down for not having like permission to use outside music.
and feel free to give us a range of, I know this is the high energy one. You can give us the chill, the
Right on.
slow vibes.
We can go across the way. Christine, good to see you again. You were on the last workshop we did, right? As you guys are coming in, just drop in the chat where you're tuning in from and what your company is. And why you're here today.
We'll give it another minute and then we'll let folks come in, but we'll get started with the and ask me anything. Well, the way this will work is will be a conversation between Raj and I for the first 25, 30 minutes, and the rest will really be Q&A time for you to ask any questions that you'd like Raj to cover that maybe we didn't get to in the interview, specific advice as you prepare to fundraise, as you are working on your deck, working on your pitch. Anything is really on the table, so feel free to use that time.
We're at the Startup Hypeman veteran. He's an actual military veteran and a Startup Hypeman veteran.
Nice.
Like that DJ slow fade there on the music right as the beat dropped.
Perfect. Well, I think we can get started with an introduction and then we'll take it off. Raj, how does that feel?
That sounds great. Let's
Sounds
do
great.
this.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to our interview and Ask Me Anything with Raj of Startup Hype Man. Raj has been a great partner to us over at P33 and TechRise, really working with our founders to help them develop their pitches, their storytelling, crafting everything, working hands-on, one-on-one with everything from the idea to really getting it onto your deck to even TechRise finale, where we welcome founders to the stage for a chance to pitch for $100,000. So again, the format of this is we'll cover really some just questions on Raj's experience, his thoughts on overall crafting a story, telling it through your pitch, and then we'll have lots of time for any questions that you may have. So thank you all for joining, and a little bit of background on Raj himself is Raj, known as the voice of startup culture. RajNATION is the founder and chief pitch artist of Startup Hype Man, helping startups ensure a bad pitch doesn't get in the way of a great product. He develops pitch, messaging, and story so they stand apart from competitors and break through in their category. So they don't just go to market, they become the GOAT to market. He was named an agent of change by Huffington Post, has given a TED Talk, been featured in Inc., Forbes, and more. He's also a hip hop artist, yoga instructor, professional MMA ring announcer. You can talk to him about Hamilton, WWE, or Seinfeld, and you'll have a friend for life. So welcome, Raj. Clearly a man of many talents, many hats. Overall, it seems like we can talk to you about anything. So excited to just talk specifically about
Let's just talk about pro wrestling for the next hour. Total swerve on everybody.
Exactly. So welcome. I guess with that, we'll get started with the interview portion, and just we want to hear about you, Raj. How is it? What's your background? What's your journey been like to get to where you are now, speaking on the expertise of pitching, but how did you get here and what were maybe some pivotal moments in that time?
Yeah, right on. Also, by the way, everybody, if she's got her camera on. If you guys want to throw your camera on, we can make this really fun and interactive as well. This will be a pretty kind of unstructured session. I mean, structured in that we've got some questions Alonzo's going to ask, and then you'll get to ask too. But treat this like we're like hanging out in a living room together. Um, so, um, sorry, Alonso, your question was kind of background on how I got started on
Yep.
this.
Yep. Tell us about.
So kind of actually very much by accident. Prior to this, I had a small business I was running called Idea Lemon. It was a side thing, and then it became a main thing. Actually, Julian, who's here, was a guest on our podcast back in the day, because he's also a rapper who's really good. So you guys should check out his music. Um, so Idea Lemon was focused on like personal brand development, and really helping people articulate their why. And we found that it was most valuable in job interviews. Like that was the market we thought like made the most sense for. Um, so that was where we tried to focus, because every job interview starts with someone asking, "Tell me about yourself," or that kind of thing. And most people have a bad answer to that. They just kind of like recite what's on their resume. And we were like, well, why would you need to be in the room if you're just going to say what's on your resume? So we figured out a pretty interesting technique for someone's like personal elevator pitch, if you will. And that worked really well. We had people get really good results out of that. The problem was and this was like immaturity I think I had at the point in my own entrepreneurship journey, was I refused to like commit to a market, and didn't have enough know-how to figure out how to do it successfully as a horizontal play across all markets. So we would like get momentum in with one group of people, and then I'd be like, well, what about this group over here? What if we focused on them next? We were constantly like hopping around, and then I don't know, you're kind of running in place with like one leg in each sort of bucket at all times. And it's almost like that stomp grapes kind of like scene of the newscaster, or like I Love Lucy back in the day, where you're just kind of like falling over. So we just couldn't really get it off the ground in a way that it was sustainable. So we did it full time for like almost 2 years, had to sunset that. And where I say like accidentally got into the startup game is, as we were sunsetting that, kind of very serendipitously, I got a call from the guy who started Bunker Labs, which is a nonprofit incubator for military veteran entrepreneurs. And we had met him through networking, just over the last year or so. And he was like, "Hey, I know you're good at doing that pitch stuff for job seekers. Do you think you could do it for entrepreneurs as well? Because we have a new cohort coming in. The last cohort did really bad on their demo day, and they're going to need some pitch help." And I was like, "Yeah, totally, I can do that." And we like hashed out like a small like consulting contract. Now the real story is, I said yeah, and then after the call ended, I hung up the phone. And I just started like frantically Google searching what is a startup pitch. So I said yes to something I didn't really know how to do yet. I just didn't have exposure to the game. But as I started to like look it up, it started to make sense pretty quickly, because I had enough of a storytelling background. And I just had to like figure out like how do you like, what's the arena in which we're playing in, and the puzzle pieces seem to fit together pretty easily for me. And then through the Bunker Labs program, it was like 20 plus companies that were in that cohort. It was kind of had like a sandbox to just kind of like test out different things, and really dive into like working side by side with founders. And it was a great experience. And that was actually the birth of the KPASA elevator pitch formula, which I know some of you on here have taken my flagship pitch workshop before, which we can get into more of what KPASA is later. But that sort of marquee formula that we use today for everyone we work with was hatched out of Bunker Labs. And the people who were working closely with me were getting really good results. So by the end of the program, like my company accidentally got incubated. Like I wasn't going in being like, "Oh, this is the thing I'm going to do next." I literally was just like, someone's willing to pay me money for something, like, and I haven't made money for the last 2 years. Yeah, I'll say yes to this. So got to the end of the program, and I was like, well, that's the most fun I think I've ever had working up to this point in my career. So I want to keep doing this. And I just like the general energy of being around entrepreneurs. Like things move quickly. There's not much room for like BS, that kind of stuff. So it worked well. So got to the end of the program, decided I was going to start this business. I had, like I said, come off of a couple of years of not really making money though. So I gave myself like 2 months, I think, to get it going. And I'll tell you, like for anyone who's just getting started, like when you're still trying to get your first customer, every minute feels like an hour, every hour feels like a day, and every day feels like a week. Time moves very slowly. So like in retrospect, I can tell you it took until, this was the end of 2016. And then so kind of like start of 2017 was when I was like, all right, this is what's happening. And Valentine's Day was the day I got my first customer. So I won't forget that. Which in retrospect, like, oh, 44 days into the year, 45 days into the year, that's not terrible. At the time, oh my God, it felt like forever. Days are really long. I got the first customer, then second one came a couple of days later, and I was like, okay, I think we might have something here. And then it was by no means a hockey stick growth from there, a lot of learning, screwing up along the way. But in that process, really like gaining like an MBA level, if not more than that, sort of deep dive knowledge into the startup game.
Nice. No, thanks, Raj. I know you say you accidentally fell into it, but it seems like there was, an initial kind of hook to really get you into understanding that a pitch is really the storytelling, right? Like whether it is getting a job, whether it's raising a round, $3 million round, $5 million round, $1 million round. There's really an outcome that you hope to get from, pitching and the storytelling. So I guess through your experience of working with founders, as you said, working kind of at the start of it to the end, what is really, something that at the start when a founder, maybe there's no deck created or there's an entire deck created, but really what is it that you recommend to founders looking at to take that step back and analyze, right? There's the design portion of a template. There is the storytelling, the actual way that you deliver a pitch. Where do you start with an area that a founder really needs to maybe focus on first before being able to get a pitch out there to potential investors?
Yeah. So first thing I would say is make sure you know what it is you're going to build or you're already building or doing before you dedicate time to a pitch. Obviously, there will be pivots and that's natural, but like if you're still in the concept stage, and you're like, maybe I could build this or maybe I could build that. I wouldn't worry so much about a pitch yet because why spend time figuring out a pitch for something you may not actually even do? So like make a decision on what it is you are building and, make an informed decision. Don't just be like, well, Raj said, make a decision. So I'm making a decision, make an informed decision on what it is you're building. And then you can start working on the pitch. Again, I know some people on here were on the pitch training workshop we did a couple weeks back. So my prescription is always start with the elevator pitch. So you get it down in 60 seconds and it's very tactical and easy to understand. The more you can get that down and refine it, the more the answers and the easier the answers will be revealed for you along the way on the things that need to be figured out. Because if you can make it clear to someone else, their ability to understand it also influences their ability to help you. So I don't just mean for like a potential capital partner or a customer, but even if it's just someone in your network, it's very hard for them to think of who else they can reference you to or what resource they can point you to if they don't even really understand what it is that you're doing. So that clarity of message and that upfront 60-second message, that elevator pitch, is really going to be the throughput through your entire pitching fundraising process. So in that spirit, I mentioned it earlier, the formula is CAPASA, problem, approach, solution, action. This is the formula that I landed on in Bunker Labs 7-ish years ago, almost 8 years ago now. And that's what everyone who works with us, that's where we start with, is developing that first. Because it's really easy if you are building technology or doing something that with visions to be high growth. it's really easy to like get caught up in the big picture to a point where the little picture doesn't make sense. And I have a total respect for vision, and I think you shouldn't generally be like projecting your vision out to people, but you don't want to be that founder that the person is constantly like just getting frustrated because they just can't figure out what the hell you're actually building or what the hell your product actually is. I have been in a lot of conversations where I'm like, I keep having to ask in different ways, like, so what is it? And I keep getting these things that dance around the actual question. So really be able to nail that value proposition. I think you went on mute.
Sorry. And when communicating that value proposition, as you mentioned, starting with the elevator pitch, maybe using the framework of CAPASA. But as you mentioned, there's different folks that you're going to get your pitch in front of, whether it be a potential customer or a potential investor or just someone who's curious about learning more about your company. And so when you have this one elevator pitch down that maybe you've memorized and you're really confident in, but you kind of have to take that shift and look at it from a different perspective, what is your take on how to best be able to have maybe different versions of a pitch or while still conveying the message that you want to get and the overall core components of that like KPASA framework, for example?
Yeah. So the beauty of that formula is in starting with the problem. Like that should also be your mindset generally, is being problem first, not product first. So maybe you have multiple target audiences, but and I say this like maybe your product serves HR and it also serves marketing. If they have the same shared problem, that's what matters. If they have unique problems, then you'd create a KPASA for HR and a KPASA for marketing, for the marketing department. When you're presenting this to, like your general stakeholder, you're going to want to essentially, it's not that different of a pitch to each person you're going to go to. So like, let's say you've just got like one market, right? Like, let's say you're just HR as your target audience. When you are talking to an investor, what's important is that you can show them you understand the value prop to your actual target market. That's more important than being able to technically understand the value prop to the investor. So the best way to set it up is be like, yeah, here's how we talk to our customers, or here's how we pitch our customers. And now you don't have to worry about, did I hit on all the right things that an investor must hear in that moment, which I'll also generally say, like, that's an over kind of thought that like,
as a strong supporter,
and it has to be like you have to say these 5 buzzwords in order for an investor to start paying attention. They're also human. They're also people. So and they probably hear enough of that already. So the thing that's going to cut through is the ability to talk real with someone. And if you're like, yeah, let me tell you, here's how we talk to our customers. And that same pitch, whether it's someone in a network, you could be like, yeah, so basically here's how it goes. And then you go right into it. Depending on how like what the first few words of that pitch are, maybe you don't even need to affront it. You could just go right into it. That's going to depend on specifically how you've developed it.
Yeah. And I'm curious, exactly as you're saying it, right? Sometimes it's not so much about diving right into here's the opportunity, here's the size of our market, this is how we're going to do it. It's more so explaining and showing someone that you have fallen in love with the problem and you're solving that, and really just maybe educating someone who doesn't know about this problem. I'm curious, like, have you been pitched before maybe working with a founder where you thought, wow, this was a really great way to get me hooked onto a pitch, or just, even as people, we only have a few seconds before we start to lose interest in maybe content, a video, a pitch, someone that is pitching you. So I'm curious if there's been really something that, wow, stuck with you.
Yeah, there was a music-based company that I met at a conference at the Startup Grind Global Conference a couple months ago. They really stuck with me, and I heard probably close to 100 pitches that day. And that was the one that really stood out. And they were able to tell a story. Literally at that conference, it was a line of founders. They each got a minute on the microphone. I happen to be the one like emceeing it, so I'm bringing them each one up, and I'm listening intently to each one. And I would say really only one of them stood out, and they were able to tell a story and make it real and make me feel that in that minute. So part of this ability to capture that 1 minute story, anyone, when we do the K-pasta formula, this is what we're focused on. But if, whatever method you use, I would say focus on this is really capture the value of one person. You cannot make someone feel a $15 billion market. It's impossible. We cannot visualize big numbers. Like the biggest thing our brains are capable of visualizing is like a large stadium, right? So you take the University of Michigan, the big house, right? That's like what, 115, 120,000 person football stadium. That's like the largest thing we can actually picture. And even then, if you think of that right now, you're probably just thinking of like, your brain creates like a blob of people, or like a wash of people, almost like a impressionist painting, really. It's very hard to feel something at scale at the individual level. So if you can really nail what does it mean to just one person, then you'll get someone to be like, oh, I get that. And this is where there's this concept I have called the TAM trap, which is what a lot of founders fall into. The idea of the TAM trap is like, yes, you're told market size is important. I'm not saying it's not important. It's just not like the thing that is going to make or break your company, particularly from a lens of like first introducing it to people. Now, when I say make or break, I'll come back to that point in a second. But like, you're not going to, and you see this a lot at events. Like if someone's pitching on a stage, first thing they'll say is like, hi, my name is so-and-so with Acme Corporation. Supply chain management is a $800 million industry growing 15% every single year. No one is like, whoa, wait a second. Supply chain, $800 million. Let me keep listening. It's a big number, and we expect a big number. Like you wouldn't be trying to build a startup if you had a small number, right? No one is doing the opposite and being like, hey, everybody, I'm in like, I don't know, what's a declining industry? Beepers? Like we're entering the declining beepers and pagers industry. I guess hospitals still use them, but you get the point, right? Like the alternative is not done. So, and if everyone is saying the big number, your number does not get remembered. It doesn't stand out. And no individual person, again, can feel what $1 billion feels like. Like you cannot feel the weight of a $1 billion problem. You cannot feel the weight of 200 million people experiencing something around the globe. You cannot feel the weight of 87% of adults aged 40 to 59 have this issue. So if you dial it back to the value of an individual person, you will get someone to say, if they are your target audience, they're going to say, wow, you really get me. And if they're an investor, they're going to be like, wow, I really understand why you would be valuable to every single one of your customers. Let's keep talking.
Yeah, and that really is the scale of the problem, right? Is exactly as you're saying, is to not really go from the head up, but really how you're gonna tackle your problem and really fall in love with it. And I know you famously, similar to the TAM trap, you have funding triangle. You talk about the funding triangle, and can you tell us a little bit more about what that is and how founders can leverage it when talking about their companies?
Yeah, so let's kind of get into like pitch deck stuff now. So a really, really good pitch is going to pull together these 3 points in a model that I call the funding triangle. So if anyone has a notebook out, you can just draw a triangle on your notebook. The top of the triangle is product strategy and vision. The bottom right corner of the triangle is your founder story. The bottom left corner is market trends. Now, there are like some sub bullets underneath each of these, but those are the main headers in the funding triangle. Most pitches hit on 1 to 2 of these, but not all 3. But the strongest pitches and the most effective ones are the ones that can effectively coordinate those 3 points of the triangle. And based on your industry you're in, the product you have, the stage of company, the overall market, it's not a given, it's an equilateral triangle. You may need to over-index in one corner versus another. So the effective balance of that, not only hitting on those, but the right balance of those 3 corners, the reason why it works is you now are not just pitching, you're actually teaching people. And pitches that teach, that's where you want to be, is that zone. Your pitch should teach your audience. Because when it teaches your audience, now they're not essentially the reaction that it generates is they're going to say either out loud or just to themselves, they're going to go, huh, you know, I never thought of it like that before. That's really interesting. You're onto something here. When you are able to teach them, now you're a thought leader. And so the perception goes from, I'll just use Julian because he's on camera. The perception goes from, oh, this is Julian, a founder building a product that may or may not work, versus, oh, this is Julian, a thought leader in this space who has accrued a lot of knowledge and insight and is building a product based off of that knowledge and insight. Right. And I love the flex there too. So like you see the difference in perception, right? One of them is a very like, I don't know, neutral kind of stance. The other one is like they feel good about you as a person. So that's how you want to come off is being someone who carries thought leadership in the market. And so that funding triangle is a good model to follow to achieve that.
Nice. And similarly, now that we're getting into really crafting maybe a pitch, a deck, one thing is write yourself. How are you going to present yourself when you pitch it, the enthusiasm at which you speak, maybe even the speed, the control, and understanding that you may have 4 minutes to pitch, you may have 1, you may have 8 minutes. But really, when you're creating that deck, you are going to both work on your own personal pitch of like, how are you coming off, and maybe the design and the structure in which you are touching on things like the TAM, market sizing, the opportunity, competitors. So I guess in this specific question, how much of it is heavy on the design and the framework in which you structure the pitch itself and the story that you tell from start to finish? Let's say you're given 4 minutes like we do on TechRise.
Yeah. Okay. So do not overlook design. Design can really, really help you with your deck. It can help tell the story if it's done well. And if it's done poorly, it can create it basically can take away from the point you're trying to make. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have seen like the classic like Airbnb original pitch deck that's on the internet, right? It looks like it was made in like Microsoft Paint. It's a bad design. I just want to like caveat, like it's a little bit different if you're like kind of going to people who already know you and there's not a whole lot you have to say to them because they're just like, yeah, I trust you, take my money, right? I also think if you go back about 14 years at this point, maybe even more than that, the market activity is so much higher now than then. And as a result, there just expectations are higher too. Like, I think the way I would look at this is put yourself in an investor's shoes. If someone is asking you for money, are you likely to give it to them if it looks like they didn't even try when asking you for money? So put care and attention into your design. Now, a couple of ways that you do this, here's some of the techniques that we like to use when we build these decks is number one, do not overload so much information into your slide. A general rule of thumb you can follow is like one thought per slide. This is going to be a really tough thing to do because you're going to want to say everything and get it all out there. But the more you say, the less people are going to remember. Especially the more like specific numbers you use, the less any of them will be retained. So consider that when you're building in not only the overall deck, but just an individual slide. How much data are you putting on that slide? Part of that, like if you were going to put, let's say, 2 or 3 different numbers on a slide, we just did this with a deck we were working on last week. So it was like, I want to say it was like something like, there were 3 stats we could use, and it was like 80% of something, 50% of something, and 40% of something. We took those same, what was it, 80, 50, 40, I think. So take those same numbers. One of them becomes 8 and 10, 8 out of 10. One of them becomes 50%. And the third one, I think, just became like something like every 4 people, or I'm blanking on the exact mechanism we use, but change like the standard of measurement, essentially, if you're going to put multiple stats on a single slide. So that way they don't blend together so quickly, right? Because if I say 80, 50, and 40, it's really hard to remember which one associated with which. But if I say 8 and 10 people have this, 40% of people do this, now it's a little bit easier to associate one stat to another, or one data point to another. Another aspect of design is considering the flow of information on the slide. Just think of how a person's eyes will move and create an information hierarchy as a result. They're going to start in the top left where your slide header is, and then kind of move their way down across the middle and to the bottom right. So consider how you're showing information, consider the hierarchy of information on your slide with where their eyes are likely going, and also use design to your advantage to focus their eyes in one place versus another. If something is not as important as another point on the slide, and again, you really should only be making 1 point on the slide, but if you're working on culling that down, you're probably making 2 points, maybe 3 points. One thing, like the main thing, should be bigger than the thing that's third most important. So you adjust the size of it, adjust the placement of it, maybe even the color of it, etc. 2 more points I want to make on design. And the second point, it kind of goes more into the storytelling aspect, but understand how color balance can work to help tell your story. What I mean by this is what we will often do, as long as like a brand's color scheme allows for this, is when indicating problem, pain, challenge, trouble, anything like that, that slide is more like darkened or grayed out, maybe like a Pantone look to it. So then when you have the answer to it, whether that's your solution, your strategy, anything good about you is now in brighter, vibrant colors. So you're kind of subconsciously getting across this idea of like you're bringing people from the darkness into the light. You are taking people from the old way to the new way. So color balance can really play a role in influencing the story that you're telling. And then the other point I wanted to make is it's not so much, it's part design, but part just like narrative structure, is your slide headers are there to guide and to tell the story. If your slide header just says market size, you are surrendering real estate. If your slide header just says business model or projections, you are surrendering real estate. You are leaving it to the audience to determine what they should take away from your slide. Your slide header should be the guiding or concluding thought they should have from that slide. Because what you're doing is you're establishing a point of view, and you're giving them that point of view. And then now they have to work from that as the starting point. So you could say, there was a deck I saw in a pitch competition I was judging a few years ago. I still remember it to this day. They were talking about their traction, and instead of the headers just saying traction, it said, "We are very good at acquiring customers quickly and profitably." You almost have no choice but to look at any other information on that slide through the lens of, wow, they're damn good at acquiring customers quickly and profitably. So your slide headers should really, like, someone should be able to just read the slide headers and pretty much understand the case you're making. And if your headers just say problem, solution, market size, strategy, traction, business model, team, what is the story there? There's no story that I could take away from that.
Nice. Thanks, Raj. That was really insightful information on really how design is so important. Similarly, analogies, I think, you've probably heard a lot of pitches that start off as asking a question like, have you used this product well, or we're the Uber for this industry or this market, and we're trying to, do this. But what is your take on that analogy part of that a lot of founders use to compare maybe their companies to an already successful later stage company when in that earlier stage themselves? And how do you either maybe incorporate that or you don't into a deck to fully understand the problem that you're trying to solve?
Okay, so you're going to hear a lot of conflicting advice and opinions on this. I'm actually curious if everyone could just use the chat and just, if you are pro analogy, just say yes. And if you're anti analogy, say no. I'm curious to hear what the general opinion of this room is. My stance on it, and again, you will hear conflicting stances, but I am very, very anti-analogy. The reason is twofold. One, you don't know that company's next move. Actually, it's probably threefold. You don't know that company's next move. So if you've been associating yourself with, I don't know, Uber or Airbnb for a while, and now all of a sudden Airbnb comes out with experiences, now you've created a perception that may not hold true for you. Another element of this is you don't know, if they have some bad PR about them. Now you don't want to carry any of that association with you. I think the other two things about this, though, that are probably the most important aspect are, one, so many people use the same analogies that it all just blends together. Like everyone is, oh yeah, we're Uber for this or whatever. So it all blends together. And I think maybe the most important reason why I'm anti-analogy is if it's not a clean analogy, and a lot of people don't think through this, is it clean or not? Then you're doing yourself a disservice. What I mean by that is just because you are a marketplace doesn't automatically mean you're Uber for this, because the mechanics don't automatically work the same. Let's just keep using Uber as an example. Uber is like, transportation is a commodity. Whether by foot, by bus, by train, or by car, I have to get somewhere every single day. So there's a built-in reorder rate as a result. I don't have to, I don't know, for example, like just because you're a marketplace, I don't have to order party decorations on demand every single day. And if you're the Uber of, or the Airbnb of party decorations, that's not a clean analogy, because the reorder rate's not going to be the same. And then you're going to actually have a false assumption about your own product, and you're going to make the wrong decisions about your company. And I've seen this happen before with a couple of companies where they ended up going out of business. My assessment is in large part because they kept thinking of themselves as the Uber for blank. So really, really think through, is it a clean analogy? I'm a bigger fan of, if you're going to use the analogy, using it more like as like a style of. So for example, like if you're pitching go-to-market strategy in your deck, doing it more like saying like Tesla style growth model. You're not saying you're the Tesla of this. You're saying you're kind of borrowing their go-to-market strategy. Brett from Better Vision, I know he likes to say kayak of sports betting, which, Brett, I know we've talked about this at length, and I'm not necessarily a fan of it when it's used up front. But if it's used as like, someone's asking about like the model, you're like, well, that's where we follow kind of a kayak of sports betting approach.
Yes.
So that's my take on analogies, and I think especially too, like if you ask someone, oh, what does your company do, and they're like, oh yeah, we're the Airbnb of this, your eyes will just glaze over. Like, just listen to when other people say it and be like, I don't want to be that person.
Great. Thanks, Raj. I want to give time for folks to ask any questions now that you provided so much valuable insights into the process, the storytelling. So I'll leave, I have some more questions, but I'll leave this time to anyone who maybe a question has come up while Raj has been speaking, or you already had a question before on your own pitch, etc.
I have a question in terms of pitch videos.
Yeah.
If you have a 1 minute or 2 minute limit on a pitch video that you need to submit, is it the same format like your KPASA with a little elaboration, or what's your recommendation on that?
If you've got 1 minute, yes, KPASA it and use. I'll tell you though, they may say in the minute, we want to hear these things in that minute. So make sure you're incorporating those. Don't just disregard what they're saying is the requirement for submission. So incorporate that in, but use it in the KPASA model. I would imagine in a minute, it's possible they may say, we do want to hear about how big the opportunity is. And if that's the case, I would put it towards the end. So like your action step would be, you've said your problem, approach, and solution, and then you're like, overall, this is an X billion-dollar market that we're really excited about. So put it towards the end. When it's a 2 minute, maybe 2 or 3 minute situation, this is not just a video submission. This is what I would say works for a pitch competition as well. Small build-up story, then problem, approach, solution, then go into the details that might be required of that specific video or competition. And then you'll close out with an action or, a big ask or call to action. Because it's relevant here, I'll touch on that for a moment too. If you're in a pitch competition, consider who's judging it. Is it audience vote or is it judges vote? That should play a role in how you kind of augment your pitch for that scenario. If it's judges vote, consider they're probably going to ask you follow-up questions on your strategy and your traction and things like that. So consider putting something like that in your upfront pitch. You don't have to go into detail on it, but if you can at least give a 1 or 2 liner on those things, that helps them know you're already thinking about it. When it's an audience pitch, you can, even if it's a judge's pitch, you can do this, but if it's an audience, like audience vote, really, really lean into showmanship and figure out what are the ways I can like activate the audience and make them part of the pitch. So a way you could do that is, raise your hand if. Make sure if that's your question, that it's a thing that people will raise their hand on. I was at a pitch event earlier this year, and the company did like the raise your hand if, and the question was like so bizarre that like 4 people in like a 150 person room raised their hand. And they were like, oh, I guess you're not like us. Well, let me tell you about why we're doing this anyway. So make sure it's something that people will raise their hand on. I actually think an even better way to do it is like if you can stack maybe 2 or 3 questions on top of each other, like raise your hand if. Now keep your hand up if. Now keep your hand up. And the idea is progressively people are lowering until like to make the point that you're trying to make. Another thing that I think you can do for the idea of showmanship in a pitch competition is like literally look at entertainment, right? What do rappers do? They do a call and response. Can you incorporate some of that into your pitch? When I say call and response, the classic one out of hip hop is, can I kick it? And the audience is like, yes, you can, right? There's a version of that you can pull off in your pitch. Like, can you say something and have the audience repeat the answer or just repeat the thing that you just said back to you? You want to make people like kind of like kinetically move in some way so that they don't just hear what you're saying, they're feeling your pitch as well. They kind of like quite literally lean forward in their seat as a result. I have seen people go on stage and hold their phone in their hand and kind of like read off of the script they wrote for their pitch. Please do not do that. Be a little bit more prepared. I think it's really valuable. This is how my brain works. I would write down the speaker notes for every single slide and then start practicing just by reading it and then slowly removing what I'm reading. So that way I know it. Because it's not like that to me is how I can riff better in the moment in a pitch, is if I know exactly what I was supposed to say, because then I'm not searching for the words so much. I need to remember what I was trying to say, but if I can really get the general flow down, it's a lot easier. I also think it's important in those speaker notes to just write in like bold letters at the top of the slide, like, what part of the story am I at? So that when you're live in the moment, if you kind of trip up, you can just think back to like, have I gotten to this part of the story yet? Yes or no? When I did my TED Talk like 12 years ago, I don't know if if anyone watching it at the time or if anyone on YouTube would notice, there's a point like 9 minutes in, it's like a 60-minute talk. There's like 9.9 minutes in where I actually forgot what I was supposed to say. And what I did in that moment, like when I look at it, I'm like, oh, I can see the exact thing. You may not see it yourself, but I know I did it. And what I'm doing in that moment is for a second, I'm catching myself up on it is like, what part of the story did I not cover yet that I need to get to next? And I was thinking literally about like my Word document and the big bold section headers that I wrote down. And so I was like, oh, I didn't get to this section header. That's what's next. So that will help you as well in remembering what you're supposed to say.
Great. Thanks, Raj. Do we have any more questions? Please. Any questions?
Let's go, y'all. What do you want to know?
I'm curious
Um,
oh, sorry, go ahead. Priscilla.
Just another question. In terms of length, especially if it's your first initial meeting that you're pitching an investor,
Mm-hmm.
do you have a guideline for that?
That's going to kind of be determined based on how the investor wants to run the meeting.
Mhm.
I think, your master pitch, if you will, is probably like an 8 to 10 minute pitch. And then you augment that based on a scenario that you're in.
Mhm.
So, like the TechRise competition, for example, is 4 minutes. That can be you're augmenting what you would have for 10 minutes down to 4 minutes and stripping away some of the details that, you just can't fit into 4 minutes.
And what
This is
about
actually, sorry, and this comes back to another thing a point I wanted to make about the timing of things in competitions. In a competition, you can not get away with, but like it really benefits to have more of like I would call almost like the Cinderella style of storytelling, where it's like the meet so-and-so, right? You like introduce a character and you take people through the journey of the character. When you're, and I'll tell you this, if you do that, and that, then as a result, someone who's at that event, like you win or whatever, and you attract some investor interest, then you don't need to change up your pitch too much for that, closed door meeting, because they've already got that baseline understanding. But if you're not planning to be on stages, you want to have more of like a closed door pitch that isn't the Cinderella style of storytelling, is a little bit more like advanced or sophisticated storytelling. This is where you really want to consider, how do you bring in these like larger market trends into your pitch and make this about something that's bigger than the product you're creating. Like, you want to really convey that the world is changing in some way, and you just so happen to have the product that is going to influence that shift in the world or play a major role in that shift in the world. I mentioned the point of trends. So like, a lot of decks have stats like market size, right? Or like X% of people do this. There's a technique we use when we build pitches called trend spotting, which is just kind of like going behind the numbers a little bit further to create a case for momentum. One of the best ones that I always come back to is with, for those of you who did the pitch workshop the other week that we did, I used Honest Game as an example in that one. One of the slides we developed there was, so you have youth sports as a $17 billion industry. That's what I would call a primary stat. It's like a big number. It's kind of obvious. You're not gonna really like flinch at that. Makes sense to you. And then the number underneath that was, it was like, I think this was the stat. It was, but did you know 4 in 5 households or 4 in 5 homes spend more on their kids' youth sports than they do on their own mortgage? That kind of stat is like a literal eyebrow raiser. Like, when people hear it, they go, they lift their eyebrow, they go, whoa, really? That's the idea of what we would call a secondary, or if you have that in another one, then a tertiary trend or stat. It's a secondary number that someone's not thinking to look at, right? It's a non-obvious stat. The more you can layer in these non-obvious stats or numbers or data points, the more effective and influential your pitch becomes. And also notice the ability to convey that in a comparative sense. That same data point could have been told as the average house spends $3,500 a month on youth sports. Is that a lot? Sure. But if I say you're spending more on basketball practice than you are on your mortgage, now it's got some gravity to it, right? Other ones you can think through would be like, and sorry, it wasn't 4 out of 5. I think it was 1 in 5. 1 in 5 families, which is still a pretty significant number. This is just something I've seen in in looking up different trends before. Video game sales outpace movie ticket sales 3-1. Right? See, Julian, you see how you reacted just now? Like, that's how people will react. He literally went, wow. Like, so the ability to be comparative with your numbers really helps.
Hey, Raj, I have a question. So at the end, when there's a call to action, whether you're in the process of fundraising, so your call to action is, seeking investment in your company, or you're, at a demo day and you really just want to get your product in front of potential consumers, how would you kind of end or wrap up the pitch to really make sure that something sticks with your audience, whether it be a potential investor or a potential customer? What is that messaging and impact that you can leave at the end?
Yeah. So how you end a pitch here is really key. So obviously you're going to have like your ask I also think it's helpful right before the ask to have a slide. This is something we've started to do over the last 6-8 months or so with our clients through learning more. Right before the ask slide, have a slide that's like gaps or like knowledge gaps or gaps we're aware of, something like that. And just like be upfront about like, we know we're good. We know we also don't know everything. Here are the gaps we're already aware of, and here's how we're addressing them. But we could use some help in these areas. It makes what you're doing real. It creates some transparency in the process, and you can even look to that investment group to be like, we're looking for a partner who can help us fill in these gaps. You'll have your ask slide. The ask should not be. I'm very bullish on this, or bullheaded about this, I should say. Don't make your ask slide a use of funds pie chart. And I say this because I have the use of funds as an appendix slide. But like the most important, if you're asking someone for money, the most important thing is not how you plan to spend the money in each bucket. It's what results that money will achieve. So replace use of funds with target milestones. We're raising $1 million so we can get our first 50 customers at an ARR of 50K each, and then establish these 5 partnerships. So think about it from a results lens and present it from a results lens versus a process or operational lens. Most people will end their deck with a slide that says, thank you. Replace the phrase thank you with a take-home concluding thought you want people to have. So think less of call to action and more like call to arms. So what's like the, is the big take-home thought like join the revolution? Is it something like that, right? Can you be like, bring them home and take them on, ask them to like join the journey with you. Don't waste real estate by just saying thank you. Now, as for what you say when you get to that ending slide, the short little, like literally word that I have consistently found works really well in developing that last slide for your talk track is I always use the word and start a sentence with look. So first off, look is like an action word. You're getting people to like pay attention now. But you want to kind of like summarize what you've said and bring it home. So like, you know what? Let me just pull one up that we did recently. So here's the closing thought of this slide. Look, for the first time ever, mental health is mainstream. That means more people are seeking out mental health care and more people are becoming mental health providers. But mainstream does not mean access. Let me rephrase it. But mainstream means everyone has access. It doesn't mean would-be patients get put on wait lists because the providers don't have any bandwidth. But what's happening today, largely due to the fact that time spent on patient care is being sacrificed in the name of paperwork, is patients being put on wait lists. And then just a little bit more about that. But you see how like you take that point and you really bring it home to get people to think about the larger issue and how you're connected to that. And I always like with, starting with look, or Julie, let's go to, here's the deal, right? Some like attention grabby starting word or phrase. Some of you know I do a Barack Obama impression, and it's based on how he talked. But whenever I do my impression, I always start with "now look," which is how Obama used to always talk, right? Now look, I'm not going to sit here, right? And that's how he would get attention.
Nice. Thank you, Raj. No, that was really, really insightful and kind of a good wrap to, how do you end your pitch and what do you leave, your audience with? So thank you. And I know we're up on time, but, if anyone who watches this, who's here, wants to work with you, wants to go through this journey and this process to get a more in-depth look at their specific pitches, what does that really look like?
Yeah.
People find
right on. Appreciate that. So first off, here's my contact info right here. The QR code in the top right corner will take you to a calendar booking page if you want to discuss having Startup Hypeman develop your pitch. Please also connect on LinkedIn. We've got an online founder community called Go to Market Club. Bottom right is the URL. You can join that. When we work with companies, it's a very collaborative process. We take them through specific steps to develop a complete pitch kit for them that starts with their elevator pitch. We figure out the narrative and story of their deck. We design the slides. We create a document called a brand manifesto that they give out to investors. And we also give them a 1-minute audio file of their KPASA elevator pitch so they can push out to get in front of investors. Very, very like deep dive into your company. A lot of the work ends up like kind of challenging some of your own assumptions about what you're building. And you come out on the other side of it like really confident and prepared. And ready to start like getting your pitch out there. Brett here has worked with us before. Hopefully he can speak well to us. And if he can't, stay on mute, Brett.
No, we love you. Yeah, definitely would highly recommend it.
Appreciate that. Just one other like quick resource I'll share. So part of our process when we are building the storyboard of your pitch deck is we have you fill out this like pretty deep dive intake form. That's a lot of questions around your product, your strategy, your vision, the market, all these things, and a lot of like kind of challenger questions as well. But one of them, because we often get like, what data points should we show around like our traction? And we provide, I came across this like last year and started putting it as a resource link in our intake form. So I'm just going to hyperlink everybody in the chat here to this. This is a really good table of a chart of metrics VCs care about based on what kind of company you are, like whether you're a marketplace or a SaaS or an e-commerce, et cetera. So I'm going to throw this in here. So just, bookmark that as a reference point for later.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Raj. Really, it's always great to have you, hear your insights, and we all really appreciate it. So thank you for your contact information. We'll also follow up with recording and for more information, ways to stay involved. And Raj himself will also send out information on a follow-up. Right, Raj?
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll get this posted to the Startup Hypeman YouTube channel. I don't know about the TechRise channel too, but definitely the Startup Hypeman one.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Raj. Really nice seeing you again, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Awesome. Appreciate y'all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.